안녕하세요, 여러분의 한국어 선생님 고빌리입니다. It's time for another Korean language analysis, and today I'm going to be analyzing the group ATEEZ, which is short for A Teenager Z, or just A to Z, and consists of 8 members. Kim Hongjoong, Park Seonghwa, Jung Yoon-ho, Kang Yo-sang, Choi San, Song Min-gi, Jung Woo-young, and Choi Jong-ho. But first, if you're new here, who am I? Well, I'm a Korean teacher. I've been studying Korean for 2 decades and teaching it for over 12 years. And after consuming a diet of pure ATEEZ videos for these past 3.5 weeks, including their live streams, official videos, and other media appearances, as well as listening to The Real and Wake Up an unspecified number of times, I think I'm ready to share with you my full analysis of each member. So I'll be breaking down how each of them sounds in Korean, including any unique expressions or dialect that they use, just anything that stands out to me as a Korean teacher. And oh boy, a lot stands out about how they sound. But first, I want to say thank you to the sponsor of this video, my Patreon supporters and channel members. In fact, the reason that I don't have to have any sponsorships in these videos is because of you. And if you would like to help support my channel and help me keep making more Korean content, please consider becoming one of my Patreon members or channel members. You'll also get access to lots of bonus content, such as Korean language cheat sheets, lesson outlines, and worksheets, as well as getting to help choose the next group that I analyze. So this time, the group that you all chose for me to look at is, of course, ATEEZ. Now, ATEEZ debuted in 2018 from the company KQ Entertainment, which manages several other groups as well as used to manage the rapper Zico or Zico. Of course, this is all basic information probably to fans of ATEEZ, known as ATEEZ, which stands for ATEEZ and Destiny. They really like their short words. Anyway, ATEEZ is an 8-member group, and as they famously say, 8 makes one team. I think they might be the only group that has a foot sign for their name. Anyway, but also 8 makes 8 analysis videos. So for this first video, let's start with the leader of ATEEZ, or I should say the captain of ATEEZ, Kim Hongjoong.
에이티즈의 캡틴 홍캡입니다.
Hongjoong was born in 1998 in the city of Anyang, which is just south of Seoul. And his story of joining ATEEZ is pretty interesting. He sent a mixtape to KQ Entertainment because he was a fan of one of their other groups, Block B. And like any major company that receives a random tape in the mail, they of course didn't listen to it. But a year later then, someone at the company found his mixtape and then contacted him. Now, I should make it clear that this is not the normal way to become a trainee in Korea. Unless, of course, you're Hongjoong, in which case it is the only way to become a trainee. Besides ATEEZ, he also hosted the MBC show Idol Radio for its 3rd season, together with another member of ATEEZ, Yoon-ho. And it's common that radio shows will have famous performers as DJs, and these will be performers with an especially strong stage presence and a clear voice. So even before knowing anything else about Hongjoong, I could already guess that he's going to be a very confident speaker. And here's a short clip from that show.
오늘 아까 시작할 때 보셨다시피 이렇게 7명이서 한번
네, 잘 채워보겠습니다.
좋은 자리까지 잘 채워보도록 하겠습니다.
Okay, yeah, he sounds like a confident speaker. And since he hosted a radio show, I can also assume that even when he's not hosting that show, that he normally speaks very clearly and easy to understand. So let's look at a few clips of him speaking outside of that radio show.
여러분 에이티즈 리더 없으면 안 되는 거 알죠? 이거 성악할 앞치 팥죽은 붉은 팥죽이고 뒤집 팥죽.
At least he was clear when he hosted that radio show. So the very first thing that I noticed about Hongjoong's Korean speaking is what many fans already know, and that he has a very relaxed way of speaking. But it's not that simple. There's something specific that he's doing that I'll point out in a moment. Now, being the leader, he often does take the lead in conversations with the rest of the group.
우영이부터 하자. 우영이가 오늘 밥 저 했으니까. 그러면 우리 뭐 하고 놀까요? 여름방학에 뭐 하고 노는 거 좋아해요?
But when he just speaks, Well, you might not want to use him for your Korean listening practice. So there are actually two things that he's doing with his speech, and the first one is slurring his speech. And I found that this happens naturally in any situation where he's not required to speak extra clearly, and he tends to slur his vowels specifically, not as much his consonants, so pay attention to his vowel sounds in this next clip.
우리가 사는 세상은 물질로 모든 거를 같이 매길 수도 없다. 왜냐면 지금 우리 8명 에이티즈 멤버들을 보세요.
I think why he's doing this is because I think that he's trying to get out his sentences with as few breaths as possible. And this leads to a lot of his syllables just blending together. Now, I should also say that this kind of speaking isn't too out of the ordinary for any Korean speaker. In fact, if you want to improve your Korean pronunciation, one way to really bring it up to the next level is to pronounce your sentences, or at least to pronounce each piece of your sentence. So whenever you reach a sentence connector, that's considered a piece, try to pronounce your sentences as one single breath. And then only take a breath when you hit a verb ending or when you hit a verb connector. So a connector would be like the 대 form or 고 or 지만, because this is what native Korean speakers do anyway, although Hongjoong does take it a bit further. Here's another clip that I picked because it's really short, but he also says his sentence in just one quick breath.
아들 지금 안 받으면 스태프 안 준대 선생님이.
Even in places where another speaker would take a breath in the middle of their sentence, he tends to just keep going. And here's one more example of him saying here two separate sentences in one breath as if they were together.
아니 근데 이 기회를 통해서 말하는데 요즘 진짜 보이스피싱 진짜 많아요. 진짜 조심하세요.
Again, pay attention to his vowel sounds, which become really loose. Now, I can hear him fine, of course, but if you're a new Korean learner, he is not the best member I'd recommend for listening practice. And that's specifically because he doesn't breathe.
뭐 사실 다 감동이지만 여상이한테는 또 다른 감동이긴 해요. 왜냐면 여상이는 이런 얘기 진짜 안 하는 친구라서.
The next thing that Hongjoong does when speaking, and which also contributes to him being difficult to understand at times, is his varied intonation. And you might have noticed this, but his intonation is a bit strong compared to most Korean speakers. So first, let me show you the intonation of a completely normal Korean speaker.
저랑 제 피부톤에 어울리는 색상은 네이비인 것 같은데? 네이비.
Of course, I'm going to show you Jongho because he's, in my opinion, the most normal member, and we'll get to him later. But personality aside, let's look at his intonation here.
저랑 제 피부톤에 어울리는 색상은 네이비인 것 같은데? 네이비.
I want to use this clip to point out what most Korean speakers typically sound like. And now this isn't a perfect audio analysis of his intonation. I just drew this with my mouse, but you get the idea. So in a typical sentence, each piece of a sentence, meaning each part where someone would normally pause, will go up at the start and then go down at the end. So 저랑, up, then down. Normally, you wouldn't need to go back down so early in a sentence. It's just two syllables. But because he chooses to pause there, he does go back down. So that would be like a piece of a sentence. And then it goes back up on the word 제. And back down on 색상은. Here it go back down on the 은 part, the last syllable. And then back up again for the next part, 네이비인 것 같은데. Now here it goes up on 같은데 because he's asking it almost like a question. He's saying, I think? And then we're at the last word, navy, which is just one word, and it goes up and back down at the end. So Korean intonation typically will go up at the very start of a sentence and then remain mostly stable until the very end, the last syllable or two, when it goes back down again. So that's for statements when you're just saying something. But questions are different. Questions will start off by going up like normal and then are mostly stable. And then at the very end of the sentence or at the end of a question, the intonation will actually go up again. And here's an example of that.
노래 틀면 안 되는 거 아니냐고요?
Again, it goes up at the start, remains mostly stable, and then goes back up at the end since it's a question. And there's a certain amount of waviness that you can add between the start and the end of the sentence, and that can give your sentence a bit of character. In fact, certain dialects tend to do this. They tend to add more waviness more than others. But this waviness is nothing like what we do in English, and in Korean, it's going to still be mostly smooth. Okay, so back to Hongjoong now. Let's look at one of his sentences with what I think is good intonation.
네, 팬분들이 아는 거랑 똑같네.
I should be clear that most of Hongjoong's sentences follow this sort of good intonation. Now, Hongjoong does not have bad intonation, but it's a bit exaggerated at times. So first here, it starts like normal. It goes up at the start and then down at the very end. In the middle, it drops a bit, but no big deal. And then raises a bit, also no big deal. His intonation is more wavy, meaning more expressive than what we heard from Jongho, but it's not off the charts yet. Now, here's another example of the kind of intonation that you're also going to commonly hear from him.
저 무서워. 약간 발개 벗겨지는 느낌이라 이거 지금 어떻게 해야 될지 모르겠네.
Do I really need to explain? Okay, I'll explain it. So he starts off this sentence normally, but as soon as he starts getting excited, you can see that it goes a lot higher and a lot lower and faster. And he's doing this up and down motion, so this waving within his sentence, even though he didn't take any pauses. But even when he's not especially excited, I still notice that he'll speak like this often. And here's another example from that same episode where he's calmed down a bit and now he's asking a question. And here, pay attention to the intonation in the middle of his question.
자주 봤는데 좀 어떤 것 같아? 맞는 것 같아요?
You probably get the idea now. In general, though, he does follow the rules. Beginning of a sentence goes up, end of a sentence goes down. But between that is where he works his magic. He tends to go up and down a lot more than your average Korean speaker. And this actually reminds me a lot of what dialect speakers do, because as I mentioned, this is common in some dialects. Now, Hongjoong, just to get this out of the way, he doesn't use any dialect, but I really like his style of speaking, his intonation, and even pronunciation because of how expressive he sounds. I think that standard Korean, which is known as 표준어, the kind of Korean that you're just going to learn in textbooks and in announcements, can sound kind of boring at times, but listening to Hongjoong speak is refreshing. It's like listening to someone speaking dialect almost, but without having to learn any dialect. But again, if you're still a beginning Korean learner, Hongjoong is definitely not the person you want to be imitating when it comes to how he speaks, especially his intonation. But if you still need any more convincing, here's just one more clip.
그 촬영 날도 그렇고 너무 내가 그러니까 난 이제 한 예를 들면 뛰면서 한 3을 부탁드리면 그걸 30을 해서 가져와 주신 거야. 그러니까 내가 이제 너무 감사했지. 그래서 덕분에
I kind of like what he's doing with the two different colors of hair. That's pretty cool. But there's another reason that I played this clip actually, and it's not only because of the two things that I mentioned, but it's because inside of this clip you can find some of Hongjoong's most common Korean words, his filler words. So words that he uses which don't have much meaning, but they're used to help just fill the space when he's thinking about what to say. So let's listen to the start of this clip again and see if we can find them.
너무 내가 그러니까 난 이제 한 예를 들면
90% of this sentence is just filler, really. And before we get into what words he's using, I just want to say that Hongjoong loves his filler words, and he loves them so much that it was very hard for me to pick only one that he loves to use the most, but I still think that I found it. But first of all, this sentence uses a few. It starts with 너무, meaning too much, but he doesn't really do anything with this word. He uses it to say it's so or so much, but he doesn't use it for its original meaning of too much. The next word that he uses is extremely fast, and you might have missed it, and that's 가. This is actually the word 그러니까, meaning so or therefore, and it's often shortened in casual speech to 그니까 or 그니까, which can then be shortened more to 그까, or even just 가 if it's said very quickly, like in this example. Now, to be clear, you'll never see it written this way. It's just how it can be pronounced. The next word he uses is 이제. 이제 just means now or from this moment, and you use it like the word 지금, which means now or right now. But Hongjoong, however, uses this word just as a filler word, so it has no real meaning when he uses it, other than just to say like, now I'm going to say something, so listen to me. And here's another clip where he uses 이제 3 times, I counted, in one sentence.
그 평소에도 이제 올리브 형이랑 이제 페페로니 형이랑 같이 이제
And here's another clip which I've edited down a lot because there's a song playing in the background, but it's originally cut out from just 30 seconds of a conversation. So let's have a listen.
이제 음원 사이트에서도 이제 알고리즘이라고 이제
In this clip, I counted him using EJ a total of 4 times, but that's not all that he used. There are also several other words that he also likes. Hongjoong, again, just loves his filler words, and some of the other words that he uses often are these. 요즘, meaning nowadays or these days. 되게, which is a slang word that means really or very. 좀, which can mean a little or kinda, but it's also just used when you're kind of softening a sentence, like if you want to make a command to tell someone to do something sound a bit softer, or to make your opinion sound a bit less direct, then you can add 좀. And 약간, which means somewhat. And here's one more short clip of him using some of these.
더 영한 친구들 요즘 이제 막 조금
요즘, 이제, 막, 조금. Again, these 4 words are just being used as filler. First, 요즘, and then 이제 again, and then the word 막, which is used in casual speech to mean like or just, and is another common filler word that you should know. And finally, the word 조금, which here means a little or kinda. So if we translate this sentence here, just these 4 words into English, we get something like, these days now like kinda. So yeah, that's Hongjoong for you, but Hongjoong never change. Now, I wish I could say that these were all of his filler words, but no, there is another. Here's another clip and see if you can find that filler word.
근데 사실 그냥 이제 정말로 그냥 지나가는 말로 하는 게 아니고 우리가 바쁠 때는 바쁜 만큼 사실 팬분들도 되게 바쁘시고
You might not have found it, but the word he's using here is 사실. 사실 is a noun that means truth or fact, but you can use it to mean actually or in fact at the start of a sentence. So you can say either just 사실 or 사실은 if you want to emphasize it more. And Hongjoong also uses the word 사실 quite often. Here are a few more clips of him using it.
근데 이제 사실
그 프로모션 기간이 되게 길었고 그 사이에 뭐가
사실 그
You might have noticed him also using EJ and other words in some of those clips. Okay, that's enough about Hongjoong's filler words. 사실, I could keep talking about them, but EJ, I have to talk a bit about his handwriting. So let's take a look at some of his handwriting. Sorry, hold on while I pull up the correct image on my tablet. This is an older letter that he wrote to fans, I think in 2019, and something that stands out to me isn't so much his letters, though I'll talk about that also, but it's just that he writes his lines kind of all over the place. He starts with them all neat in the middle, but then as his sentences get longer, he starts to, they move to the left and start kind of falling down to the right. But as for the syllables themselves, he actually writes really nice. I think his handwriting looks bright and a bit playful. His consonants are all written really smoothly. In fact, so smoothly that his mium consonants, that's the letter M, are written almost like round balls, which isn't wrong, it's just his style. Look at the last sentence here though. 곧 만나요, 우리 ATEEZ. This means let's meet soon, my ATEEZ. And those wavy lines at the end, those things you see, are used to extend the vowel sound of a word or an expression. And he uses 2 of them. So you can imagine that he would be saying this sentence like 우리 ATEEZ with a longer sound at the end. And adding these wavy lines can make a word or expression sound more friendly and less stiff. So I think that it matches his personality, but not everyone uses these. Also, you can see that those mium consonants are written really smooth. Look at the word 만나요. And that letter here almost looks the same as the round letter on top of the word 우리. And again, this is just his style, and I think it looks nice. So let's look at a more recent letter. This one is from 2022, and he wrote it as if he were leaving into space. So this was his last letter. And all of the members actually wrote letters like these. So let's take a look at his letter. Look at the second line, starting with 티니들이 이 편지를 읽을 때쯤에는 나는 우주에 있겠네. Some of the letters here are thicker than the others, especially the last sentence. Look at how he wrote SNS. It looks like he was fighting a battle with his calligraphy pen and lost. It has to be that he's just using like a weird pen or something. I'm not going to put all the blame on him for this. It has to be that calligraphy pen. But besides that, what he actually wrote in the letter is straightforward and I think easy to read even for learners. Let's just look at the third sentence. 지구에서 함께한 시간 동안. So during the time we spent together on the earth. 우리 티니들 덕분에 너무 행복했어. I was so happy because of you, ATEEZ. 이렇게 소중한 시간을 선물해줘서 너무너무 고마워. Thank you so much for gifting me with this precious time. And my favorite sentence that he wrote here is the last one where he writes, P.S. 달 토끼 만나면 So if I meet the moon rabbit, meaning the rabbit shape in the moon, 사진 찍어서 SNS 업로드할게. So I'll take a photo and upload it to social media. I think it's cute. Okay, let's look at one more letter. I actually found a ton of his handwriting, but I'm only going to be picking a few examples. This is a letter that he wrote to Yosang, and you'll notice his writing in the previous examples and this one. It's a bit rough around the edges, but it makes it unique. It makes his writing Hongjoong. You can see that he just scribbled out some parts where he messed up as well. And other parts where he was writing really quickly and a bit messy, like in the middle of the first sentence. 활동하는 게 늘 부담스러워. So you can see this in this part, especially with 활동. He wrote each of his syllables lifting his pen from the page, but then when he wrote 부담스러워, he just wrote 부담 a bit messy, but just kept going. And if we go to the end of the next line, 너를 볼 때마다, he stretched out the 때마다 part, and I think just he did that to make it match the same length as the first line, which is funny. And like before, he wrote this letter very simply and straightforward, and it's sweet. In fact, all of his handwriting I've seen has been like this. He writes sincerely and directly. Let's look at the middle of the page at this sentence. 데뷔 전부터 그리고 지금도 내가 가장 좋아하는 목소리를 가진 여상이. 여상, who has my favorite voice from before we debuted and now as well. And I found in this letter and in his letters to the other members, he's straightforward like this. He occasionally will add wavy lines or hearts in letters to his fans, but to the other members, he's more straightforward. He doesn't add smiley faces or hearts all over the page. In fact, the only decoration that I found is an occasional exclamation mark. So I think that it just shows that while on the outside, Hongjoong is a goofy, excited, and expressive person, on the inside, at least to the other members who are his family, he's calm, straightforward, and sincere. Okay, and I could keep going on, but I still have 7 more members to cover, so that's enough for this video. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and also subscribe to my channel for more Korean content. Thanks again to my Patreon supporters and channel members, and if you would also like to help support my channel, you can find links to my Patreon page and how to become a channel member in the video description box. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time. 그럼 다음에 또 봐!